Good evening and welcome on in to the overnight edition of From Day One. From the 25 time zones around the world, Art Bell, back in his own home at midnight in the desert, brings us talk about SETI, the search for extraterrestrials. Now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, wherever you are in this fine world of rock through Dominion,
from the high desert,
here's Art.
The great American Southwest. This is Midnight in the Desert, and I'm Art Bell. Good evening, everybody. It is my pleasure to be here. This is Midnight in the Desert. We have but two rules for the program. No bad language, and only one call per show. Beyond that, we have no rules. We have some thank yous, always. Telos for the great sound, and oh, by the way, it is great. I want to read this from Tom. I know it'll sound like it's an ad. I guess it is, sort of, right? From Tom on the wormhole. Art, the earbuds are so good from the Zeke Crane Company that I can hear you snort when you laugh. Really? You mean like... That? I got the premium wood ones, he says. I highly recommend. They fit well and love me. Thanks for the excellent advice. Regards, Tom in Reno, with an H. I guess it's Rhino. Anyway, Telos for the great sound. Thank you. Keith Rowland, my webmaster I found out of 20 years now. My producer, Heather Wade. All of you out there, Bell Gab website, great bunch of
Crazies?
Vaguely lovable, grumpy, interesting people. A site called People Who Love Art Bell, midnightin desert.com, the Bell Gab web, I said that, the stream guys who get it to you, lv.net, and they get it to the stream guys, and then of course our commercial guy. You want to run a commercial, you'd be well served since we have so few. Contact Peter Eberhardt. You can find him at artbell.com. All right. Just a couple things to note. One, China rattled entire global financial markets by announcing they are devaluing their currency. Now, do you know what that means? And that means that things from China are going to get cheaper. They're trying to stimulate their economy. It declined by 1.9%. That's big. That really is big, folks. The biggest drop in a decade. And so things from China will get cheap, but it's not necessarily good for us. The Donald made a big deal of that, and he's right about that. A young Mississippi couple who are charged with attempting to join the Islamic State were held without bail Tuesday, so two more want to go over there and fight. Why, I don't know. Why Americans are doing that, I don't know. A random encounter leads to astonishing discoveries. This is pretty amazing. Between two men who, get this, they didn't know each other, but they had still managed to lead the same life with wives and children, all of the same name. They had the same cars, the same vacation spot, which is, by the way, where they met each other. Psychologist Chris McKay says, in his years spent as a therapist, he's begun to understand something about synchronicity. I mean, what are the odds of that, right? Two lives identically led. Just less than 0.1% difference between them. Actually, no difference at all. It would just be too weird. It's like I would go on vacation, meet another guy who looks like me, meet his wife named Erin, and his daughter named Asia, and we're driving identical cars, color, everything. That is just simply too weird. That was from anomalous.com, and what a good website that is. All right, I'm going to read this, and then I'll break. Now, I don't want a response to this tonight. Maybe we'll do it Friday. It's going to open the doors of whatever. I don't know what it's going to open. Have you noticed this is all over the internet, so I just simply can't and won't ignore it. Have you noticed there's a tremendous amount of internet buzz about the month of September 2015? Never before have I seen so much speculation about what would happen in one particular month. Some people believe that we're going to see an economic collapse next month. Others believe there's going to be some sort of historic natural disaster. Others convinced Judgment Day is coming. So right now, large numbers of Americans are apparently stocking up on emergency food and supplies like crazy. I'm beginning to get a little concerned about the period myself. Several weeks ago, I think I did express a belief that chaos will begin once the summer ends. These are the last days of normal life in America, people are saying. Just about everything that we currently take for granted is about to be shaken. It seems a lot of people lately are having a gut feeling that something really, really big is about to unfold, but nobody knows exactly what it is. Maybe people are feeling this way because of the events that are taking place around them now. Signs in the heavens, military stockpiling, politically disturbing events. There does appear to be a confluence of activity in both the political and spiritual realms, culminating in 2015, causing people's alarms to go off. So this is all over the internet. I'm not going to talk about it. In fact, I refuse to talk about it now, but we may talk about it Friday. It will open the gates of whatever. All right, coming up in a moment, Seth Shostak. Seth developed an interest in extraterrestrial life at the tender age of 10. When he first picked up a book about the solar system, the innocent beginning eventually led to a degree in radio astronomy. Now, as senior astronomer, Seth is an enthusiastic participant in the Institute's SETI observing program. There's more than one. He heads up the International Academy of Aeronautics, a SETI permanent committee. Hope I got that right. This comes in slightly, somebody types on an Apple computer. When I get it, it comes out a little differently, especially the punctuation parts. Seth, there is more. I forgot. Seth will also update us on all the signals thus far received from all the life forms out there. Right? He will update us on the aliens that SETI has had examined, how they now have 37 different alien languages that they've interpreted, and, of course, all of the technical advances that have been derived thus far from the technical information taken from these aliens. Hello, Seth.
Hello, Art. How are you?
I'm fine.
37, huh? Well,
I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself.
that's okay. If we had those 37, I think my job security would be a little, better.
Actually, it'd be pretty shaky. I mean, if we actually had 37 different aliens, the budget for looking for them might, dry up.
Well, that's true. You'd have to sort of switch your job description to studying as opposed to searching.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd have to do that.
How long has it been since we talked?
Well, I don't really know. I think it's, maybe 3 years, 2-3 years, something like that.
Mm-hmm. At least that long, I would say. SETI, it goes on to say, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence is an exploratory science that seeks evidence of life in the universe by looking for some signature of its technology. And in a moment, when we get back, I will ask Seth exactly it's very interesting, what kind of signatures they might be looking for. That would certainly be interesting, wouldn't it? From the high desert, the great American Southwest, midnight in the desert, rockin' in the nighttime. Did you see the light? This is Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell. Please call the show at 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CALL ART. You know, we may do something a little bit different tonight. By the way, I love this song, and it really gets my blood going. As we have Seth on, I'm going to dispense with some telephone number stuff right now. You've got the landline number, right? It's area code 952-225-5278. Once again, 952-225-5278. Now, you can also call us on Skype from North America. The way to do it, on your iPhone or your computer or whatever, just bring up Skype and put in MITD51. MITD51. If you're outside the U.S., MITD55. That's as in Midnight in the Desert, MITD55, and give us a call anytime. We may start taking calls during the show, with Seth sort of occasionally, peppering it with calls, sort of just playing around with a different format. All right, welcome back, Seth.
Thanks, Art. I'm here. I'm awaiting those calls.
Okay. You really want calls that fast?
Well, no, not right around.
All right.
Right away. But I always find the calls the interesting part of the show because, to be honest, that's the part I haven't heard before.
Well, yeah, you're right about that. Actually, there may be a few things tonight that you haven't heard before.
Okay.
So let's straighten something out. When you talk about signatures of technology, what kind of things are you actually looking for?
Well, there are several ways that you might, in fact, convince yourself that you'd found some evidence for something that's intelligent out there in the cosmos. One thing would be, if they physically landed or you went there. I mean, that's straightforward. Happens every night on television, but we're not about to go anywhere. And undoubtedly we'll get into the second possibility here tonight, whether they're visiting us. I don't think they are, but that's straightforward. The second thing you could do is maybe you could see something, with a big telescope that would convince you that, Bob, I don't know what that is, but it isn't natural. Some huge astro engineering project. Maybe there's some advanced society that's built something so big that we can see it with our telescopes. And the third way to do it, and the approach that we use here most often, the SETI Institute and other places that do this kind of research, is to try and pick up signals, and radio signals are what we usually look for, but you can also look for flashing lights in the sky. So that's the method of choice, I would say, to try and prove we have some cosmic company.
Back to the telescopes for a moment. We have a hard time resolving small things with big telescopes on Mars, right?
Well, yeah, I don't know what you mean by small. If you don't have an orbiter that's actually at, for example, Mars, what you can see from the ground is pretty limited. Big mountains, things like that are probably the smallest thing you can see. Fortunately, Mars is close enough that you can, put something in orbit around.
Okay, I made a poor choice. Pluto.
Well, Pluto. Well, Pluto, actually, we can see things on Pluto that are, I don't know, the size of a football field, something like that. And that's pretty good, given the fact that the cameras that made those photos, which were aboard the New Horizons spacecraft, they had one shot. That spacecraft didn't land on Pluto, obviously, but it didn't even go into orbit around Pluto, which would give you, weeks, months, maybe years to make these photos. It just sailed right by at a speed that, it was by the whole planet in a few minutes. It didn't take very long. So you get that one shot. It's sort of like you're in your car, and you see something interesting there on the sidewalk as you're going down the street. You grab your camera, and you take a couple of pictures, and that's all you get. So it's really amazing that they've got these incredibly detailed photos of Pluto.
All right, it is. But telescopes don't see a whole lot, right?
Well, I suppose compared to, a visitor or a rover or something like that.
And if you're going to say they do, then I'm going out to Alpha Centauri.
Yes.
Closest star system, I think, right? Star.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, telescopes are pretty limited in terms of detecting life, unless it was pretty close, relatively speaking. So you listen for the more likely thing. which would be radio signals. It's been years since we explored together. Seth, I don't know the current state of SETI, what telescopes you have available to you, what kind of computer power you're using, what frequencies you're listening on, that kind of thing.
Well, we are using an array of telescopes. It's called the Allen Telescope Array, and that's because the money to build it was largely given by Paul Allen. Paul Allen was the co-founder of the Microsoft Corporation. Everybody knows about Bill Gates. Well,
right.
Allen was his partner in the early years. And Paul Allen is interested in opportunities that, new developments in technology make possible, things that are interesting to do, but you never could do them before because you just couldn't build the technology. So he has funded this array of antennas. It's so far up to 42 antennas. That's what we have, 42 antennas. The idea is to build many more, but that takes more money, and it's always difficult to get the money.
I would say 42 is pretty impressive.
Well, 42, yeah, but it's really designed to have hundreds. That's what you really want. And it turns out that by building hundreds of small antennas, you get kind of the performance, in fact, more than the performance of one giant antenna for a lot less money. So that's the way to go these days. Anyhow, this array of antennas is up in the Cascade Mountains of California. It's about 300 miles north of San Francisco. We put it up there not because of the beautiful scenery, although the scenery is beautiful, and not because of the cuisine, because there is none, but because you got all these mountains and they kind of shield the antennas from all the radio static that you would get from the Bay Area here around San Francisco.
How big are they generally?
Well, each one of them, they're all identical. They're all about 6 meters. It's like 20 feet in diameter. If you put one of these antennas in your backyard, you'd probably provoke opposition from the neighbors. They'd probably want you to remove them as an eyesore. But
I have a 3.8 meter dish in my backyard now, and I'm getting static about that.
Are you? Yeah. Well,
yeah. Not from neighbors. My wife walks out and goes, "Oh my God." Anyway, so 42 telescopes. Now, again, a technical question. These are kind of in parallel in the sense that they turn simultaneously and focus on the same point in space, and is their gain then therefore collective?
Well, it is. They don't have to do that. It's not that they're kind of chained together and they all have to all point in the same direction. I don't know. It's sort of like a chorus line in a way. They're all doing the same thing. They're all kicking at the same time, turning around, whatever, at the same time, but they don't have to. And the same with these antennas. They could be pointed individually, but the general scheme is indeed to have them work as a team. Right. They all point in the same direction in the sky, and they're spread out over about, I don't know, maybe 3,000 feet of landscape up there. The idea is, you could build one giant antenna, and that would collect a lot of cosmic static just because it's big.
Arecibo.
Yeah, Arecibo. But, Arecibo's fixed in the ground. It's a big antenna down in Puerto Rico. It's 1,000 feet across. It's huge. But, you can't turn it. You can't twist it. You can't build that kind of structure. It's too expensive. So you build a lot of – it's like taking Arecibo and hitting it with a hammer or something, break it up into, dozens, maybe hundreds of small antennas, and then you can get very much the same performance with something you can afford to build.
So if you were to suddenly start getting some kind of signal, just an example, something weak, you could focus all of your antennas, or as many as possible, on that one source, have the collective gain hear it better.
Yes. Well, in fact, that's the way we do the searching too. Actually, they're all looking at the same spot. So you decide, okay, we got these antennas, we got them for this week. What are we going to look at? And you could just point them randomly at the sky, but normally speaking, you don't do that. You try to be a little more clever. And so we point them in the direction of star systems where we know there are planets. These days, that might actually not be such a terrific strategy anymore, because now we know planets are so commonplace. You really can't miss pointing at planets. But, if you decide where you're going to point them, they all work together. They're looking at a few spots on the sky at once, and then you got this huge receiver that's listening to 30 million channels at once, trying to see if there's some channel in there, some frequency, some spot on the radio dial where you pick up a signal and, change the world.
30 million channels at once.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's really incredible. So the computer's come a long way, huh?
It has. Well, the computer, yeah, a lot of this is indeed, as you suggest. It's digital technology that makes all this possible. And there's actually an upside to that. the upside being something called Moore's Law, which, sort of drives the industry around where I'm sitting, which is the Silicon Valley. As most listeners will know, every couple of years you got to replace your computer because, the computers on the store shelves then are so much faster than the one that you had that you don't get any respect at parties when you tell them you got a
I know, it's depressing.
3-year-old laptop. Right, it's depressing. But it's good for the Silicon Valley. So they'll sell you a new laptop, a new computer, whatever it is. The same is true for SETI. Every couple of years, the equipment gets so much better that the search becomes faster. So I think that's what keeps me interested.
All right, actually, not everybody knows about the WOW signal. Let's go over that incredible event that occurred to SETI. You had what you call the WOW signal, which was.
Well, WOW signal. Yeah, we didn't pick it up, actually. In fact, it was before the SETI Institute, which is where I work. Before the SETI Institute was actually founded. That came later. But this was a SETI experiment being run at Ohio State University, which is in Columbus, Ohio, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a big antenna there that they've been using for astronomy, radio astronomy. But it sort of outlived its usefulness, but it was still there, and it was a perfectly good antenna. So they said, okay, what we're going to do is just put the brakes on it. We're going to have it just park here, just aimed in one direction. You might think, well, that's not terribly interesting. But, of course, the Earth does rotate. And so, it's looking at one spot on the sky, but, the sky kind of sweeps across it as the Earth revolves. And so they just put I think it was like a 64-channel receiver. I don't know how many channels their receiver had. It wasn't 30 million. It was a small number. This was in 1977, and, it would just look for signals. And every morning, one of the astronomers, a guy by the name of Jerry Amon, actually, that was the guy's name, he would come in to the observing room. In those days, they print out the results on paper, for people who remember those big line printers that computers used to have. And he would just flip through the paper and look for a signal. And one day he came in, and there was a big signal, and he wrote WOW next to it. So that became known as the WOW signal. I mean, this is maybe the triumph of marketing over product, because, all those other signals that were found, and there were many others that were found in those days, they didn't have such a nifty name, and they're not remembered. But the question is, was it ET?
Okay, do you have a recording of the WOW signal?
No, there wasn't any recording. It was just a bunch of numbers printed out on this line printer. And you can go online. I mean, people who are interested should go online and just, search for...
What do you mean a bunch of numbers? Look, we all saw Jodie Foster sitting right there with those headphones on, and this boom started up, right?
Yeah, well, we did.
And you're telling me it's only a bunch of numbers, huh?
I don't want to disillusion you. You're too young for me to disillusion you, but, it was a movie. Okay?
Young.
So, no. There were just like, 10, 12, 15 numbers that went from, something like 0, then 1, 3, 5, 8, and then 12, and then they had some hexadecimal numbers because they, when they got beyond 9, they needed some other way to represent the number. But it's just a string of, maybe a dozen numbers.
Yeah.
But these numbers are a combination of actual, numbers like 0, 1, 2, 3, ordinal numbers, and then plus A, B, C, D, E, F. Now, if you program computers, that's hexadecimal. But it's just a way of representing numbers up to 16.
So in other words, these were meaningful.
They were just the intensity of the signal. That's all it was. It just went up and it came back down, and that's it. And if you listen to it, you wouldn't hear anything. You would just hear some static that went. That's it. That's
pretty cool.
Yeah, well, that's kind of neat, but you can't dance to it. The thing is that telescope was programmed to automatically reobserve everything a minute later. You sort of, check it out.
Yeah, but the Earth is turning.
It is, but they offset the receiver in such a way that it would look at the same spot on the sky.
I see.
So every spot on the sky got two tries, if you will, 2 opportunities to make the signal known. So this signal was found, but a minute later, it was not found. So, what was it? Well, maybe it was ET, and, he was on the air for a minute, and then it took a break. I mean, it could be. Or maybe it was just interference, and then it went away. Could be. But you don't know. Nobody knows. So,
well, it had to be WOW above everything else they were getting to be called the WOW signal.
Yes. It was very strong.
Was it observed by more than one? Well, it wouldn't have been, no, because only that was pointed at it.
Yes. There have been attempts since that time. I mean, this is quite a while ago. This is almost 40 years ago now.
Right.
And there have been attempts. There's a gentleman in Chicago, Robert Gray is his name, and he has actually gone to radio telescopes around the world and got a little bit of time and, reobserved that spot on the sky where the wow signal came from with much better equipment, actually, and much more sensitivity and looking over much more of the radio dial, and he's never seen it again. So, if you only see it once, you might be convinced, but nobody else is going to be convinced.
Got it. All right. This is that break where you can walk around, do what you want. Break. We've got news, a couple of spots, and we'll be right back.
To sniff our packets, then with a smile on your face, please call the show at 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CALL ART.
Love that. Actually, it sounds like an alien language, doesn't it? All right. My guest is a significant person, Dr. Seth Shostak. He is senior astronomer and director of the Center for SETI Research. And that's quite a title. Seth, welcome back. Okay, I think welcome back. There you are. All right, Seth. A lot to talk about. So we had the wow signal. And then you had been working for, many, many years, right?
Well, yes. I mean, the wow signal
Since
77, I believe, 1977. So that's a while ago.
Okay, since 77, have you had anything as impressive as the wow signal apparently was?
Well, at the time of the wow signal, the way you would do these experiments, and you point the antennas up in the sky, and you had to record the data. You didn't have the compute power back then to actually, analyze it kind of real time. So typically you would record things on computer tape, like in the old sci-fi films, on these big tape units there, spooling computer tape.
Yes, of course.
Well, they actually had that stuff. So, you'd record those things, and then you would take this tape back to wherever it was that, you actually worked. That might be far away from these antennas. It might be thousands of miles away. So you'd cart all these tapes back to your office, you'd play them on a computer there, and then you'd analyze things, and you'd find a signal. And you say, well, what's that? And it looks kind of interesting. But, of course, you can't just immediately check it out because it's long gone. So in those days when you had that situation, there were lots and lots of signals that looked interesting. Okay, but today we have enough compute power that when you get a signal, you immediately check it out. And it turns out if you have that capability, then all those kind of intriguing wow-like signals seem to have gone away. So that says to me that those guys were not real. They were just interference, and you didn't have the ability to identify it as interference at the time.
So then a person might almost say that since we've been listening, there probably has not been a signal indicating extraterrestrial intelligence received by radio.
I think that's a fair thing to say. In 1997, we did have a signal that looked really good. And it looked good for, about a day. And I was at home. I just had dinner, and the boss calls me up at home, and he says, I think you ought to get down here. And so I drove down to the Institute and found all my colleagues arrayed behind a phalanx of computer terminals, all watching the screens because they picked up a signal that looked good. Now, that was very interesting and very exciting for about, 16 or 18 hours till we figured out it was a satellite. But for quite a while, that was maybe the longest time we went where we thought this could be it. Now,
it would be sure fun to hear what that 16 to 18 hours was as all of you listened to this incredible signal that you thought was coming from elsewhere. That's still actually a long time, 16 or 18 hours. That's a long time. You, of course, called the president, right?
Called the president of the local Rotary Club. No, I didn't call the president. I don't know the president's number, actually. But I was expecting somebody to call us. I have to say that. Because usually you hear, come on, guys, if you found a signal, the federal government will move right in. The men in black will show up and shut you down or something. But,
that's right.
Yeah, it didn't happen. Nobody was interested. I mean, there were people who were interested, and by the time it was all over, the newspapers were calling because they knew about it by then. No, the government never showed any interest.
If the signal had been a description of how to build a better bomb,
yeah,
they'd have been there. Trust me.
Maybe. I mean, who knows what the signal was? It was a signal, but we're just picking up what's called the carrier signal. That is to say, it's just a component of the signal that's there to carry the information. So it's not actually interesting to listen to that somebody's on the air, and that's the first thing you want to do.
So you were hearing a carrier without modulation.
That's right.
So modulation
we weren't even hearing it. It was just numbers on a screen.
Okay. Modulation is the intelligence that would be included in the carrier.
Exactly. So it was a radio signal without any message, if you will. Okay. But only because if there was a message, it would take a different kind of equipment to find that. It turns out it's much harder to find the message than it is just to find the on-the-air sign, if you will.
Okay, so then to sum up, other than that great excitement, and of course the WOW signal, which you kind of dismissed, there's been nothing in all these years and all these planetary systems we pointed at, nothing.
That's right. That is correct. And some people think that's, significant. They think, well, you guys have had plenty of time to do this. After all.
Even you were one of them. I remember you telling me, and I'm sure you remember it. You said, if we don't get a signal, and I forget what it was, the next 5 years, 10 years, something like that, we're going to have to start thinking there may not be one to get.
Well, I don't quite remember that way, but
maybe it was 50 years. I don't know.
What I do remember saying, and this I would say again. In fact, I'm going to say it again right now. If SETI doesn't succeed by, I don't know, say 2050, that's a long way off. 2050, so that's 35 years away. If we don't find something by then, because by then we will have looked at millions of star systems, millions. At this point, we've looked at thousands. But because of the improvements in technology, by then you looked at a fair sample of star systems. And if you don't find anything after looking at millions of star systems, some people would say, okay, that proves it. We're the smartest things in this part of the universe. And a lot of my neighbors believe that's true.
Would you be one of those saying that at that point?
I would never be one of those saying that. That strikes me as entirely too improbable. What I would say, though, at that point is that this is the wrong experiment. We're not going about this the right way. What we're looking for isn't something we're going to find by listening.
So you've already thought of this, actually, right? And that tells me you've already thought of a better way.
Well, I'm not sure I've thought of a better way. I can think of ways that, sort of improvements or changes in what we're doing that might really change the odds.
Like what?
Well, the most obvious thing is simply to have antennas and equipment that's 100 or 1,000 times more sensitive. See, we're listening for signals that have to be fairly powerful. In other words, the Klingons, or whoever they are, up there, they have to invest a fair amount of money in their transmitting setup, unless they know we're here and they're deliberately targeting the Earth, and they can make a very focused, if you will, a very beamed signal, and then it doesn't cost them so much. But if they don't know we're here and they're just giving the, if you will, the galactic weather forecast, or maybe it's the galactic internet signal, or whatever it is, if it isn't really intended directly for us, we're only going to hear it if it's an incredibly powerful transmitter, and that might be unrealistic. Maybe they don't want to pay for all those kilowatt hours. So.
Right.
And in that case, if you had receivers that were 1,000 times more sensitive, then maybe the landscape changes.
Okay, so we pretty well summed up these signals not received to date.
That's right.
All right. Something I want you to hear. Hold on just a second, and you'll get a chance to respond to it. This is a Dr. Stephen Greer, and I know that you know that name. So what I want you to do is listen very carefully.
Now, I'm going to say something here because this is enough years after it happened. A few years ago, there was a show called Coast to Coast with Art Bell. And it was on the cover of Time magazine, and I was one of his favorite guests. And when I'd be on that show, it really lit things up at certain agencies. And one time I was on his show, and a few years back, towards the end of his career there, and this issue came up, and I said, well, I have a source high up in SETI that confirms to me that they in fact have received interplanetary signals, but in a kind of phased, not normal array. It was kind of a pulsed array, and that it was kept secret and covered up. And the SETI people were furious. Subsequently, Seth Shostak got on the show and just said, well, Dr. Greer knew what he was talking about, and he probably talked to some volunteer computer operator, because we have all this network of volunteers. What Art Bell didn't know, and which Seth Shostak didn't know, which I'm going to say now because it's enough for water gone under the bridge, is that the guy who told me that was the founder of the SETI project and the Drake equation, Dr. Drake. He told me that they had that contact. Moreover, a man who had been one of Carl Sagan's best friends, best man at his wedding, confirmed it. And he had been present when the WOW signal came in at Harvard.
Okay. There you have it. I'd like to get your reaction to that.
Well, I'll try and moderate myself here. I actually do remember the show when Stephen Greer came on your program, as he says, and he went on for, a couple hours about how he knew that we had found a signal. Now, first off, you got to ask yourself, if we had found a signal, why wouldn't we tell the world? That would really help our funding.
Right, but at that time, to be fair, he didn't say how he knew this.
Oh, he did. He did.
He didn't say what he just said.
Somebody at SETI told him. He said somebody at the SETI Institute told him.
Okay,
at
all right.
a party, actually. And
there you have it. He laid it out here, though, who it was.
He did. And I got hold of, Coast to Coast, and I said, this is incredible. And they said, we'll put you on. So I was on with you, I think the next night, or within 48 hours anyhow.
Right.
And what I had done in the meantime was there are only 4 scientists. There are a couple of engineers. There are no volunteers. All of that is nonsense. Also, the WOW signal suddenly was at Harvard. I suppose you heard that, whereas in fact it was at Ohio State. But never mind any of that. The thing is that there were only 4 scientists connected with the SETI project at that time, and of course they were all just down the hall from me. They're not casual acquaintances. They're people I work with every day. And I went to all of them, including Frank Drake, by the way, and said, what do you know about Stephen Greer? Not one of them had heard of Stephen Greer, let alone have talked to him at a party somewhere. And so I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. So I called up Stephen Greer's organization. Should I go on? I mean, do you want to hear more of this?
A little more.
Okay. So I called up Greer's operation in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I asked to speak to Mr. Greer about this because I wanted to know with whom he had spoken. He didn't say on the air when he was with you that it was Frank Drake.
Right.
Of course, if Frank Drake had known that we'd pick up a signal, Frank Drake would be, he'd have a Nobel Prize on his mantle today. And they didn't let me talk to Greer, actually. And in the end, they just stonewalled me. They said, well, he's busy. And I said, look, could you just at least send me an email? Just have him tell me a date or a location where he heard this information, just so I can verify it.
Yeah.
And he refused to do that.
Well, I doubt they refused. They probably didn't know at that point. I mean, the reason I pulled this audio, obviously, is because he laid it out. The people involved and everything else. Now, are you absolutely sure, Seth, that if one was received, that even you, as senior astronomer, of course you would know, but I mean, what if there's some protocol that even you don't know about?
Well, I was chair of the international committee that set the protocols, so I guess I know about the protocols. But beyond that, you just got to back off from this for a moment and look at what we're trying to do. We're trying to find a signal that would prove somebody's out there.
Oh, yes.
We do this on the basis of volunteer donations. I mean, the only money we get for this is the money people send us because they think it's an interesting thing to do. Now, if we had found a signal and that looked pretty good, doggone it, that the problem of the funding, of course, would go away. But it would be like asking a cancer researcher, Ralph, you're looking for a cure for cancer. Now, are you sure you're not keeping that a secret? Maybe you found it and you're keeping it a secret. Would you say, well, does that make sense?
From some points of view, Seth, you know it does.
Well, not in the case of SETI, because, there are people who will say, Seth, if you guys find a signal, probably the government would want to shut you down, keep that news quiet.
Yes.
And I ask, every time somebody says that to me, I have to come back and say, why? Why would they want to keep it quiet? It would be one of the most interesting discoveries ever. So why would they want to keep it quiet? If you discover Antarctica, do you want to keep it quiet?
Well, I've got a lot of answers for that.
Okay.
And
I'm listening.
And we've had this argument before, or this discussion before, but there are obvious answers. It would, depending on the nature of the contact, it might well very much upset religious faith across the world, not just here, but across the world. And it would just depend on the nature of the contact. If it's just some, we're here, we're here, we're here, but we're 100 light years away, no problem. 100 light years seems like, plenty of separation. But if it's, we're here, we're going to take over, get your armies ready, they'll last about 5 seconds, that's a different kind of signal, right?
Well, to begin with, that's a signal that we couldn't pick up, right? Because that one has modulation. Right? That's a signal with a message. Remember, we're only listening for the dial tone, if you will. We're listening for the carrier. Okay, so the carrier doesn't carry any information. It's just part of the signal.
Well, yeah. But once you get the carrier, you're going to be looking for the modulation real quick.
It's a completely different instrument to do that, and it would take 10 years to build that.
What?
Yep.
You mean to tell me if you got a signal that amounted to a carrier of whatever nature, you couldn't examine it for any modulation for 10 years? You serious?
No, you could try. But the thing is, if they were just modulating the carrier, this is getting a little bit technical.
Modulation, folks, just means information.
Right.
Right? Think of this carrier, this signal.
You can look at the carrier as it's like a whistle. It's a single tone.
Yes.
Like that.
Right.
And they could turn that on and off.
That would be some kind of modulation.
Right. Interstellar Morse code.
Right.
If they had a slow fist, if these guys were really slow in sending their Morse code, maybe you could pick that up. They're only sending a few words per minute. But they're not going to do that. If they're going to the trouble of building a transmitter that's, sending information into space, they're going to send a lot of information. You're not going to waste time, sending a few words per minute. Any more than you want to dial up modem anymore. So,
Well, when we transmitted from Arecibo in that very controversial transmission, we sent information.
Very little information. 1,679 bits. That's not much. Any page of text in a magazine has considerably more.
More than a blank carrier, though.
It was done with two carriers. And you might be able to get that. But the point is really a different one. The point is you're picking up a signal. There's no danger in picking up a signal. If somebody tunes in their favorite talk show host, right, in their car radio, they don't have to worry that talk show host is going to jump into the car and start giving them a hard time just because they got tuned in. The talk show host doesn't know who's tuned in, right? So that would be the same with us. We pick up a signal. Of course, they don't know that the signal may have taken 1,000 years to get to us. The guys who sent it might be long gone, but
I sometimes feel like strangling my callers, occasionally.
But do you ever do it?
No, it's just a thought. Innocent.
That's the difference. And in any case, Mr. Greer, I've had to occasionally debate him on the radio, but he just makes stuff up. I hate to say this, but he just makes stuff up.
So that's where you stand in response to that statement. He made it up.
Yes, absolutely. You can talk to Frank Drake himself. Ask him, hey, Frank, did you ever talk to this guy, Stephen Greer? I asked him that, actually. And he said, I don't know who that is. That was his response.
Well, yes, and you would think if he made a statement of the kind of magnitude we were talking about here, certainly he would have recalled it.
Oh, well, not only that, but if we picked up a signal, it doesn't matter whether he recalled, Stephen Greer or not.
Unless Frank, turned around after you asked him and thought, oh, my God, how does he know? You don't think so, huh?
I don't think so, no. Nope, really don't.
We do have to talk about protocols. You say you have written the protocols that would be used if a signal was detected. And I guess, when do the protocols kick in? How many people have to verify it before the protocols begin?
Well, the protocols are simply, if you will, a code of good practice. It sounds like something for a television
Code of good
station
practice.
or something.
It does.
I mean, there's no force of law, and there have been protocols. They were set up during the NASA SETI days. So even back, in the early 90s, these things had been drafted.
Sounds like something you for an outline for a sitcom or something. Listen, hold tight. We'll be right back. We're at a break point. Seth Shostak, the senior astronomer and director of the Center for SETI Research, my guest.
Look at us, but do not touch. Voda is my name.
In the darkest time between dusk and dawn, from the high desert, it's Art Bell's Midnight in the Desert. Now, here's Art.
Well, okay, I'm going to sort of semi-open the phone lines, even though we've got a lot to talk about with Seth. So if you have a Skype call you want to make and you're in North America, it's so easy. MITD 51 is what you put in. It's like you're going to dial something. MITD 51 and call us. Here is Seth Shostak once again. All right, well, so we've got to face at least the possibility, Seth, that we are all alone. Although we did recently, I saw this amazing photograph. In fact, it was too amazing to be true. They called it Earth 2. I guess you probably saw that headline somewhere. There's this planet they found, but it's really far away, I think. And they call it Earth 2. Did you see that headline?
Well, I think you're probably referring to a planet called, its other name other than Earth 2. It's Kepler 452b.
That's the one.
Okay, all right. Well, that's probably doesn't look quite as impressive on the library card as Earth 2.
No, and they actually showed a picture of it. It had an atmosphere. You could see continents.
Yeah, well, all of that is an artist's impression.
Yeah, you got it.
They haven't actually seen this thing. This was found by the Kepler Space Telescope, which is a NASA telescope up in orbit, and it was launched, 4 or 5 years ago? And what it does is what it did up until, part of it broke, up until about a year ago, it would just stare at 170,000 stars and just measure the brightness all the time. Every 30 seconds, it would download, the brightness of each one of those 170,000 stars. And if what a particular star had planets going around it and they were oriented the right way, well, that planet would get in front of the star and just reduce the brightness of the star. An Earth-like planet doesn't reduce the brightness very much because it's small compared to the star.
Right.
It will reduce it by about 1 part in 10,000, so 0.01% typically. And this was one that they found in the data that did that, and it was about the same size as the Earth. It was also in the same sort of orbit as the Earth because its year, they know that because of the time between, it dims the star and then a certain period of time later it dims it again and dims it again. And the period of time was 385 days.
Pretty close.
Well, it's pretty close. And so, if you lived on that planet, you would age a little bit less quickly. At least the birthdays wouldn't come quite as quickly. And so it also is orbiting a star that really is very similar to the sun, a little bit brighter, but not much different than the sun. So here you have a planet. It turns out to be about the same size as the Earth, a little bigger, 60% bigger. It has the same year. We don't know if it has the same day or anything like that, but we know the temperatures on that planet are going to be somewhat similar to Earth because it's the same distance from its star. So that's why it's called Earth 2. It's a cousin of the Earth, we think, maybe.
Okay. That is neat stuff. So it's very much like Earth in most ways that we can see, including perhaps the temperatures. I guess we have no way yet to detect if it has water, right?
Yeah, that's hard to do. The problem is there are ways you could think of to determine if it has water. If you could get a little bit of light from that planet and pass that light through a prism and then analyze the rainbow and all that stuff. These are things that astronomers do all the time. You might see water vapor in the atmosphere, that sort of thing, but you have to get some light from the planet. And the problem is this star system is, I think it's 1,400 light years away.
All right, that means, folks, that if you could travel at the speed of light, you would have to travel for 1,400 years to get there. Correct, Seth?
That's right.
Mm.
Well, if you could travel at the speed of light, you get there essentially instantaneously from your point of view. But from anybody watching you go, they'd say, well, Luigi took 1,400 years to get there.
No, wait a minute. What have I got wrong here? If it's 1,400 light years away and you're traveling at the speed of light, it takes 1,400 years to get there.
Depends on whom you ask. That's just special relativity. You know that the clocks don't all run at the same speed, at the same rate. This is what Einstein figured out and published in 1905. If you're in a car, you've got a watch and it's set to the same time as my watch, and I'm just standing on the side of the road watching you drive by, I would see that your watch seems to go slower than my watch.
Yeah.
Now, at 60 miles an hour, that doesn't make really much of a difference.
No.
But if you're going at the speed of light, then your watch stops. So from your point of view, it took you no time to get there. But but of course you can't go at the speed of light, so maybe that's not the right way to look at it. Maybe the right way to look at it is if you could go, say, 99% of the speed of light or something like that.
Yes.
Then from the standpoint of somebody on the ground, they would say, okay, it took them a little over 1,400 years to get there. But from the standpoint of the crew on the spacecraft, they would say, well, that only took a couple of months. They would have only aged a couple of months.
They would have only aged a couple of months, but still, they would have spent 1,400 linear years in travel, wouldn't they?
Only by the calendar and the clock back on Earth. The clocks on their ship would have said, well, you've been here for 3 months.
Really?
Or whatever it was. Yeah. That's relativity. I mean, it's non-intuitive.
Well, that's relatively cool.
Yes, it is relatively cool. It's also relatively strange. But, I mean, in some sense, that's the big hope for ever going to the stars.
All right, listen, you want calls. They're ringing off the hook, so let's take a couple, okay?
Okay.
All right, here you are. It's Midnight with Seth. Hi.
Hello, Art.
Hi there.
Yes, sir. Welcome back.
Thank you.
But some of us, having to go through the Art Bell withdrawal.
Well, thank you. Where are you located?
Okay, I'm calling from Niagara Falls, New York.
New York, okay. Well, here's Seth. Go ahead.
Yes, Seth. Number one is I've been a big fan of the SETI at Home software. Been running it for years, and I recently stopped for a while, but that's beside the point. You guys started to address what I was about to ask. I see one of the problems is that while you're searching for a signal, if you're trying to get a signal from a star system that is, say, 1 million light years from here, well, then you're betting on a civilization that is, 1 million years more advanced than us, because it's going to take 1 million years for that signal to reach you.
That's a pretty good point.
Is that a correct thinking?
I think it is.
It's
relatively speaking.
Just a couple of things there. I didn't get your name.
Mario.
Oh, Mario.
Mario. Okay. Are you super? Okay, Mario. Well, you're absolutely right about that. That means that if it was from 1 million light years away, that the signal was sent 1 million years ago, and that means that they would have had to have developed, powerful radio transmitters 1 million years before we did. That's not impossible. The universe is 13 billion years old. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old. In other words, the universe has been here 3 times as long as the Earth has. So most of the stars out there are billions of years older than our own. So, what the heck? Why couldn't they be 1 million years more advanced?
But okay,
yeah,
but
go ahead.
Just like our television signals have left this planet and is traveling throughout space, okay? Someone could be watching I Love Lucy, even though I don't think it's gotten that far to another star system yet, okay? So that race really doesn't have to be that much more advanced than us, but the idea is trying to pick up a signal. That race would have to be 1 million times more advanced than us for that signal to have left that star system for you to receive.
Got it. I really do have it. Thank you. Thank you, Mario. Well, all right. Let's take off from there. First of all, why does everybody use I Love Lucy? That always has to be the thing received. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it's written into law somewhere.
If we received a signal from, a planet that far away, what did he say, 1,000 light years?
He said a million light years.
A million light years. That's kind
much
of
farther than
overdoing it.
Right?
Overdoing it. Say 1,000 light years. That would mean that we were essentially looking 1,000 light years into the past when they had radio. And so if they still exist now, in the now, they will have been that much more advanced. And to them, if they even paid attention to our puny little answer, assuming we sent one, we'd be to them as ants are to us.
Well, that's a lot, yes. I mean, that could be.
Okay, it could be, yes.
A couple of things. To begin with, in general, we're looking, tens, hundreds of light years away. So, the difference isn't that enormous, but the point is still valid. But so what?
Well, what do you mean, so what?
Well,
they would come. They would wish us gone, and we'd be gone if that's what they wanted. That's how powerful they would be.
They could be very powerful, but again, all we did was pick up their signal. They didn't know that we did that.
And that is where we will leave them for tonight. Come on back for tomorrow for part 2 of the SETI conversation. Till then, make sure you do like, share, and subscribe. Help us get to that goal of 50,000 views, 1,000 subscribers, as you all have been having to do so. We greatly appreciate it. Again, 50,000 views gets us those nice red packages we can send to you guys from good old Boxy over at Extras. And of course, 1,000 subscribers puts us on the Google YouTube map. Till next time, like, share, and subscribe, be kind to one another, and release the Kraken. As we march this evening, this overnight, and every overnight here from day one. Have a great overnight. We'll see you tomorrow.